why is Lester Holt moderating this debate? By the way, these are the same people who, in the name of checking Republican candidates on facts, were the same people that have lied systematically about, he goes straight down the list.
Yeah.
Truth about what happened, the Russia collusion hoax, truth about the origin of COVID-19.
Yeah.
People forget about that. You'd be silenced, censored, and reprimanded for saying that it began in a lab in China when we now know it began in a lab in China. Hunter Biden laptop. I believe truth about January 6th.
Very
truth of how our
fine
money's
people
being
on
spent
both
in Ukraine.
sides.
Yeah, you could go Jussie Smollett,
Yeah.
Covington Catholic kids. I mean, the straight down, the same people have looked themselves and their audiences and their camera in the eye and lied, pretending to be the arbiters of truth, selected by the RNC to moderate a Republican debate, asking questions that no Republican primary voter cares about. And Ronna McDaniel, a failed leader of the RNC, we're all supposed to sit around and pretend like there isn't a cancer in that organization. I said, I'm taking it off.
So if you ran again, for whatever capacity, is that something that you would fundamentally do different, like hand the reins of the machine part of it? Maybe more to somebody else, and then you just focus, because the message part, that's where you shine. Obviously.
In order to do that, and I've built a number of companies over the course of the last 10 years, one of the things that I've learned is you can't, like the handoff of, you can't found a company and then day two, hand it off.
Right.
You really have to have your own imprint on the way that's done, the culture that you build, and then probably a couple cycles of people who you really trust in each of the key roles. And then you go on and it stands on its own 2 feet. And it's a beautiful thing when that happens.
Yeah.
First major company I founded, that took 7 years. A couple of companies I've founded since then have actually been able to compress that, but you're still talking something that is measured in years, maybe even in a campaign setting in months, but not in weeks.
Right. And by the way, when you and I were squibbling over little DeSantis things, I always wanted him to campaign more like he governed than like he campaiged. So nobody does it perfect. Well, Trump may be the only one that does it.
I think Trump did it outstandingly well.
Pretty damn.
He actually did it really well.
Right.
And I'm pleased. I mean, look, if we look back over the course of the last year, for all the million small things I would have done differently, the main obstacle I had when I first declared is, it was no different for the world that I was running for president than I wasn't.
Right.
And that was actually kind of a surprise. I'm like, hey guys, I'm here.
Right.
And, at least the rest of the media and even much of the Republican Party establishment from first few months of the campaign behaved like, I was not present.
Right.
And, by August, I was at the center of the debate stage. I was proud to be one of the last remaining candidates in what I thought was a productive cycle of policy debate within the Republican Party. And I hope we had a positive impact on the future direction of our movement. And I think that there's a lot of work yet to go. So I'm proud of what we accomplished, but a lot of learnings as well along the way.
Yeah. So I think your best moment, I was actually there for it, and I don't think most people really understand the context of it, but was at the Miami debate, which I was in the audience for, and Ronna McDaniel comes out first before it's televised, and she kind of gives a talk about the future of the Republican Party. Everybody in the room was like, we do not like this woman. And you could just feel it. You absolutely could feel it. And then the debate opens and you just ripped it. You went after her. You went after the moderators, the whole thing. How much of that were you planning to do? And did you also, was it sort of like, okay, I'm going to hit both directions right now? Because you're going after the head of the RNC and you're going after, in essence, the DNC, because that's what NBC is.
It was a day of instinct, actually. One of the things I learned from the debates is I'm at my best when I'm unconstrained. In the latter part of the campaign, certainly I kind of made the decision that I'm done with taking political advice.
Yeah.
I'm done with calculating what is or isn't going to work. Because first of all, I don't think anybody who's forecasting that's very good at it anyway. Certainly I'm not.
Right.
And second of all, what's the point of going through the motions if you're not presenting the actual true view that you have at a given time? And there's risks with that.
Yeah.
Risk number one is you may not say things in a genteel way. Risk number two is, not everything I believe today is exactly what I believed 8 years ago. Fine. But I'm going to tell you, the 99% of things that are the same, I believe with greater conviction because I'm tested. And 1% of things that are different, great. We're human beings who should be open to argument. But with that said, I'm going to tell you right now what I believe, and I'm going to tell it to you in an unconstrained way. And so that was my approach to the debates. And so that morning, that was literally the day after the 2023 election cycle, where we again got thrashed. I mean, Republicans had disappointing results across the board. No different than in 2022. No different than in 2020. It was literally the day.
Oh, that's why. Because when she walked out,
yeah.
everybody was like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah. And for me also, like that wasn't something that I was I mean, I don't know what the results were going to be, the Virginia elections and so on. But you see that the day of and you wake up, and I was kind of pissed off.
Yeah.
2023, 2022, 2020, 2018, it's starting to become a pattern without any iota of accountability. And then I actually literally the day of, like that morning, I couldn't have told you who the moderators were going to be the night before, but looking at who the moderators are, asking what the hell the Republican Party is doing, hiring these people to be the moderators. So it was Kristen Welker, who was it?
Holt.
Lester Holt,
Lester Holt, yeah.
Exactly. And so I'm reading this, I'm looking at Ronna McDaniel and the results, the person who chose this. And by the way, now play that forward. Yeah. Ronna McDaniel joins NBC.
Right. Well, it was a hell of a day she had over there.
It was a hell of a day she had. Yeah. But I think it was ridiculous that she chose NBC in the first place to be the moderator. The RNC chose the NBC to be the moderator. Now we're seeing, in retrospect, how poor of a choice that was. And yet we're going to go walk out, have a debate in the aftermath of another disaster for Republicans.
Here we go.
And we're all going to just be silent about it. And so, yes, I just decided to let loose a little bit and call out what everybody wanted to at least hear some accountability for, and said, why is Kristen Welker moderating this debate? Why is Lester Holt moderating this debate? By the way, these are the same people who, in the name of checking Republican candidates on facts, were the same people that have lied systematically about, he goes straight down the list.
Yeah.
Truth about what happened, the Russia collusion hoax, truth about the origin of COVID-19.
Yeah.
People forget about that. You'd be silenced, censored, and reprimanded for saying that it began in a lab in China, when we now know it began in a lab in China. Hunter Biden laptop. I believe truth about January 6th.
Very
truth of our money being spent in Ukraine. Yeah, you could go, Jussie Smollett, Covington Catholic kids. I mean, the straight down, the same people have looked themselves and their audiences and their camera in the eye lied, pretending to be the arbiters of truth, selected by the RNC to moderate a Republican debate, asking questions that no Republican primary voter cares about. And Ronna McDaniel, a failed leader of the RNC, we're all supposed to sit around and pretend like there isn't a cancer in that organization. I said, I'm taking it off. And a lot of people were, I'm glad you said a lot of people liked it, because a lot of people were pissed off within the Republican Party. And I'm not sure that it particularly helped me to sort of do it that way either, but I thought it was useful.
The reason I thought it was particularly good, having been there, was because they don't air her speech at the beginning, and you could feel the hatred in the room towards her. Now that
I wasn't there for that too.
Right. So now that you remind me that it was literally the day after, it's like, it all fully makes sense. So what do anyone that's not a Democrat right now, what do you do about that? What you just laid out there? There is a structural machine, Trump, whatever, you can partly call it the deep state, but it's much bigger than that, because it's media and the whole thing, that puts everyone who is not a Democrat in a system that is basically rigged against them. What do you do? So even if you were running 4 years from now, like, what do you do about that?
Yeah, I think that I have come to an even more firm conclusion that the machine, and we'll talk about what constitutes the machine. It's not just the three-letter agencies. So that's the biggest mother of all of the managerial bureaucracies. In a university setting, the associate deans of God knows what. In a corporate setting, the HR bureaucracies permeating corporate America, and even many of the people who are professional board sitters at Fortune 500 companies.
Would you call that like sort of the rent-seeking elite, something like that?
Yeah. I mean, yes. We use the word elite so much that it has sort of, it's over-inclusive. I call it the committee class, right? The people who professionally sit. It's called sitting on a board of directors. The sitting committee class, the managerial class. It's kind of the horizontal deep state in and outside the private sector. The undersecretary of God knows what. Ambassador to some second-rate, ambassadorship. To the person who's the associate dean of diversity or whatever they're supposed to do. To the HR bureaucracies in corporate America. It's the same kind of breed of the managerial elite, you could call it, the managerial class, the committee sitting class. I have come to the conclusion that whether you're talking about a university or even in a corporate setting, or certainly in the federal government, that can't be reformed. You have to be willing to take an axe and actually break the machine, shut it down. Mass firings, I mean, even in a political campaign, the industrialization of politics, from the way all these campaigns are run, it's the same kind of horizontal class of people who'll be running one super PAC to go to another campaign, rebuild the same machine. That managerial class, I think, really has to be, you have to take a jackhammer to the thing. You can't take a chisel. You got to take a chainsaw to it. And there's risks with that. Taking the federal government, right?
Sure.
Or in a company. I mean, was there risks to Elon saying, I'm going to fire 80+% of the employees at Twitter? Of course there is. There's a risk that certain things aren't going to work.
Over there.
But you got to jump off that cliff. And in that case, we discover that actually nothing broke. The sun still rose in the east and still set in the west. And the thing actually worked better afterwards rather than before. I think you'll generally discover the same thing, but we got to be honest that we're taking some small risks of inconvenience along the way.
So
right? Some small risk that some inconvenience at a federal agency or whatever is going to be the consequence of cutting 75% of the people there. But I don't think it can be reformed. I think it can be shut down. And if you're going to take the risk between not cutting enough versus cutting too much fat that you might also cut some muscle, I will take that risk every day of the week, because you can at least add back on a fresh scaffold rather than an 8-headed hydra. If you cut off one of its heads, it grows right back. That's the mode that we've otherwise fallen into.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.